Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wedding Film Coach. My name is Luke, and today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new Sony a7s III. Name is all but confirmed, and a few of the rumors that have recently come out just after Canon's announcement of the R5 and R6 coming up. Hey, real quick before we get started with everything, I just want to ask if you would do me a huge favor. I would love for you to subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell to get updated on all the videos we're going to be coming out with here in the next few weeks as these cameras come out and as more information trickles out about them. I'm going to be doing a lot of videos to cover all of the news, and so if you like to get your news via video with YouTube, then I would love for you to stay here with this channel. And also, I'm going to be getting these cameras whenever they come out, whenever they're available. So I'm going to be doing some extensive testing with them from everywhere from autofocus to overheating to all the specs that we expect, just to the quality. Get to see some footage that I take for testing them. All of that is going to be here on this channel. And so hit the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you know whenever I release a new video. Thanks so much. Let's get to the video. Everybody in this world, you're watching, so you're a part of this world. Everybody in our world is really excited about cameras right now. Why? Because there is this new push of technology that is really giving us an incredible amount of engineering, an incredible amount of technology, and all of the things that Canon and Sony and Nikon and Panasonic and whoever else have learned over the last decade of trying to get as much technology into these cameras as possible. My mind is taken back to kind of the DSLR boom back really kind of the early 2000s when everybody started getting these DSLR cameras that just created this beautiful image, and everybody and their mom became a photographer, right? Because they were so inexpensive and accessible at that point. And now fast forward to around 2013 and 2015, whenever mirrorless cameras started getting so popular, and Sony was really the first one to kind of push this technology forward and really believe in it. And now, of course, Nikon and Panasonic and Canon have all jumped on board, and they're developing their own cameras for it. And I believe that we are right now seeing the fulfillment of a lot of those growing pains. And this really started last year with the Panasonic S1H when they delivered 6K video internal recording and gave us pretty much everything on paper and specs wise that we could want. I got that camera and did some testing and did some reviews for it. It ended up not being for me, but I really think that it's a great camera if you're doing less run and gun work and more studio or commercial kind of work where you have a controlled setting. You can control your lighting, you can control your subjects and all of that. But all that to say, I'm really excited that the Canon R5 and R6 has been announced. We got some great specs on those, and now we are starting to see these rumors trickle in a little bit more consistently for the Sony a7s II successor, which based on these rumors is confirmed to be the Sony a7s III. And so let's talk about the Sony a7s III. I'm here on SonyAlphaRumors.com, and this is definitely a rumor site, so take this with a grain of salt. However, Sony has confirmed, Sony themselves have confirmed that the successor to the Sony a7s II is coming. They plan to make that announcement late July or early August. They have 2 cameras coming out that they are really excited about. All of that has been confirmed from Sony themselves, and so that is not rumors. And so with that as context, I have a pretty strong feeling that these rumors are pretty dead on, at least really close to being 100% right, maybe 90-95% right. And so let's take a look at what we know so far. So like I said, the first thing that we can confirm is the Sony a7s III is the name of this camera. And so there was a little bit of confusion and back and forth and speculation about maybe it'll be called the Sony a7s IV because the Sony a7R IV came out last fall in September, and everybody was saying, well, they wanted to get their high-end photo-centric camera out before the Olympics happened for this summer. We all know now that COVID-19 happened and Olympics got postponed, and so that I don't know if that ended up being good for them or not, but anyway, that's why a lot of people speculated that they came out with the A7R4, maybe what seemed a little early or a little prematurely. And so there was speculation that they may just skip a generation with the Sony S line and call it the A7S4, but they've gone ahead and we see that it's all but confirmed that it is the Sony A7S3. And so it's going to continue being consecutive numbers, as a lot of people suspected. What's the next thing that we can talk about? So let's look here at our rumor site. The first rumor I want to talk about is this. It came out late yesterday. The Sony a7S2 successor will record full HD, so that's 1080p, at 240 frames per second, and it will shoot 4K 120 frames per second, 10-bit 422 color sampling, and 4K 120 frames per second raw over HDMI. That means you'll need an external recorder, something like the Atomos Shogun. That's really a popular one. And so the wording there may make me believe that it's just the 4K 120 frames per second raw that you'll need an external recorder for, or it may also be the 4K 10-bit 422 that you need an external recorder for as well. RAW is obviously more to handle than the 10-bit 422, and so I'm hoping that that is just exclusive to the RAW, that we'll just need the external recorder for that, and at 120 frames per second. It's not alluded to here in the rumor site whether 4K 60 frames per second will have the RAW option. You would think that it would, since that is less. That takes less work to do than 120 frames per second, but it just doesn't say. He hasn't got a rumor about that just yet, and so it's still speculation at this point, but I believe that probably over even today or tomorrow or Monday that we will start seeing a lot more information trickle in, and so I suspect that we're still going to get the 4K 60 frames per second, hopefully raw internal. That would be incredible if we could get raw internal, much like the Canon R5 has introduced. But that's still all speculation at this point. So let's keep talking. Also, it is going to have the highest resolution EVF in a mirrorless camera, or it says the world's highest resolution, 9.44 million dots. That's a lot of dots in the EVF. It doesn't indicate anything for the back panel LCD screen though, and as a videographer, that is the main thing that you're going to be using throughout the day. As a wedding filmmaker especially, I choose not to use an external recorder or an external monitor just to keep my gear small and compact and nimble. And so I'm not sure, it doesn't say anything about the back panel LCD right now. I hope that they really improve their LCD panel. Canon, Nikon, and Panasonic all have better LCDs than Sony, and it's starting to kind of become a meme, and it's starting to become a little bit embarrassing that Sony has these incredible cameras that you can really get incredible video out of, but as far as looking at it and monitoring it from the back panel, it's just not a great experience. So as far as they've said before, Sony has said before that they plan to exceed expectations. I think that all of Sony's video users expect a good LCD back panel, and so if they want to exceed that, they really need to put some technology in there and make it work. So Sony, please get that done for us. It also indicates that they have a new passive noise, that means noise-free cooling system, and so that tells us that it will not have a fan in it, much like the Panasonic S1H did last summer or last fall, whenever that came out. A lot of people speculated that just, again, with the increase of work that these cameras are doing and processing and making those videos, that it's going to have some sort of fan or some sort of exhaust in it. But it mentions here that they have a new technology in there, that it's a passive cooling system. I'm not sure if this is just more heat sinks maybe located at the bottom of it, or potentially more heat sinks around the camera as a whole. We'll have to wait and see. And that's a good segue as far as talking about the camera as a whole. We see also that they say it's going to look really similar to the A7R4, and so we can know that it is going to have a very similar form factor to what all the A7S line has had before. The A7R4 introduced a bit of a new design, just very, very small though. The A7 III is much like the A7R4, and so I feel like if you're familiar with the A7 line, this is going to feel really comfortable and really familiar in your hand, so no worries there. Anything else on that first one? Oh yes, this is important. So it is going to support UHS 2 card slots, and so I assume that that means dual card slots, because as videographers, we want to be able to record simultaneously, just to have an extra backup in case there's a failure somewhere, or if you don't want to back up simultaneously as you're recording, then just to use that second card slot as an overflow. Again, if we're recording really high quality 4K footage, then we're going to need a lot of memory, and so that's something that you could potentially even go ahead and prepare for as we're getting ready for these new cameras to launch. Is go ahead and upgrade your existing memory cards to be able to handle everything, but definitely wait until everything's confirmed before you go out and buy something. And so we can assume that it's not going to support CF Express cards, much like the Canon R5 is doing, and I think that's a good thing, and that tells us a couple of things. So I think that tells us that if it's not going to support CF Express, that they are very focused on 4K, and we're going to get to the next thing in a second, which makes me believe this. I think we're just going to see 4K as the highest resolution out of this camera. And let me just go ahead to that. So the next rumor that we have here is that the Sony a7s III has a brand new 12 megapixel sensor, and it will be unlimited recording. So they're going to lift that 29 minutes and 59 seconds recording limit off of the camera, which is awesome, and honestly everybody expected that. Without going into too much detail about it, there was some sort of EU tax law that said anything that recorded past that time, 29 minutes and 59 seconds, was taxed more for some reason, and so that I think that tax law has expired, and so a lot of our companies now, much like the Panasonic S1H, they have lifted those recording limits. As long as the technology can handle it, they're lifting those recording limits because they're not penalized anymore for having that function in there. So that's a good thing for us. Let's talk more about this sensor. So this is a new 12 megapixel sensor, and it has a fast readout, but it's not going to be a global shutter. A global shutter essentially means that it takes the whole frame at the same time. It gets the information, it gets the light of the whole frame at the exact same instant, and so it doesn't read by line, or it doesn't read from the top to the bottom, much like these sensors do. And so this is not that. This is not a global sensor, and so this is going to have a readout where it starts at the top and then ends at the bottom, but it says it's going to have a fast readout, and so hopefully that means that we're not going to experience much global shutter. They may have even developed this technology to really limit that, or remove most of that noticeable shutter, rolling shutter completely. That would be awesome. You know, we have to be realistic with that as well. I mean, if you're doing whip pans everywhere, then you're probably still going to see that, but I feel like if you're doing whip pans, that is for a very specific reason, cinematically, storytelling wise, and you'll be able to compensate for that in your editing room if you need to have those whip pans there. But for normal use, especially for wedding films, we want that footage to be nice and smooth and cinematic. Then I don't think we're going to see any issues with the rolling shutter at this point. I just feel like the technology that they've developed, especially with this being a new sensor, we should be past that now. So as far as exceeding expectations, then that is what we need to see to exceed our expectations. Let's keep looking at this. And so it's going to have a 12 megapixel sensor, fast readout, no global shutter, no recording time limit. It also indicates that it won't have any overheating issues, much like the Canon R5 unfortunately announced that it's limiting those record times because of overheating worries. And so if this passive cooling system works like they want it to, you're not going to have to worry about overheating. And I kind of take that with a grain of salt, because I mean, if it's producing these incredible 4K images, then it's going to develop heat. It's going to produce heat. And so it better have some really great heat sinks in it, or whatever kind of technology they're putting in there to completely dissipate that, or else we will have to worry about overheating eventually. But hopefully it's to the point where it's not going to be noticeable. We're not going to have all these cases where people have to send back their cameras or send them in for repair because they've overheated so much. So that's the hope. So let's just kind of do a roundup real quick of the reviews, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on pricing, what we can expect, and maybe other things that I have, other expectations that I have as far as them exceeding what I expect. So just as far as a rumor recap here, it's going to have a 12 megapixel stacked sensor with a fast readout. It's going to record full HD, so 1080 at 240 frames per second, 4K at 120 frames per second, 10-bit 422, and 4K 120 frames per second raw over HDMI, meaning externally recorded. It looks and feels similar to the a7R4 as far as form factor is concerned. Has the world's highest resolution EVF at 9.44 million dots. Has a new kind of passive noise-free cooling system, which is awesome. We're not going to have to worry about that noise. Has no overheating. That's the thing that I'm a little suspicious about or skeptical at. No overheating at all is a big statement. Effectively, I think they could do that, but we'll see. No recording time limits. That's great. That's definitely what we expect, so it's good to see that. UHS 2 card support, awesome, and an announcement in late July. So coming here in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we can expect an official announcement, an official reveal of all the specs, what it looks like, what it's going to, how it's going to perform, and all of that. So let's take a step back here. Based off of these rumors and what we don't know yet, if we're assuming that these rumors are mostly true, let's say 90% true, what we don't know is what the capabilities are for 4K 60 frames per second. I think to exceed expectations, we're expecting 4K 60 frames per second, at least in 8-bit 420. That is like a bottom layer expectation right there. And so to exceed expectations, we need 4K 60 frames per second, 10-bit 422 in camera, internal recording. I feel like that is definitely the thing that's going to exceed expectations there. And for 4K 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, I think the expectation there is definitely 10-bit 422 at 24 frames per second and 30 frames per second. And kind of along with that, I expect a better compression rate, a better bit rate. I want to see, in the past we've just got 100 megabits per second. Canon has given us 1,000 megabits per second. And so I think Sony, the expectation there is to definitely increase that. I'm not techie enough or I don't understand all that enough to know what would be a good expectation, but I know that a better bit rate, a better compression would certainly be better, and we expect more out of our Sony video for sure. To exceed expectations, I feel like if they gave us that 1,000 megabit per second all-eye compression, then that would just create an incredible quality image, and that's what we want for sure. We expect a better LCD screen. For sure, we expect a better LCD screen. Definitely better than the a7 III, definitely better than the a7S II. We expect something at least as good as what the a7R4 has a really good LCD screen, but I would hope, just because of the video nature and always constantly having to monitor that through the LCD screen, that they would put their best foot forward in this part of the camera, that they would put the best technology they have in the LCD screen, and that they would be able to really increase the level of quality there for us. Okay, so that pretty much sums up my expectations and what I hope to see in the camera. Let's talk about price. And so I did a little research, and I feel like we're going to see a really competitive price from Sony with this camera. A lot is riding on this new push, these new cameras, this new technology that all of these manufacturers are developing right now. They need to get it into the hands of their consumers. They know that consumers are really excited about it. At the same time, they have to be realistic and know that COVID has put a damper on everybody's revenue, on everybody's cash flow. So I think from their market share, that they have, that people who would normally buy this camera as soon as it came out, they're probably looking at maybe 60 to 70% of what sales would have been if this year would have been normal, if COVID hadn't happened and business was thriving as usual. And so I feel like the pricing for this needs to be competitive. So Canon came out first, priced their R5 at $38.99, essentially $3,900, which honestly for 8K video and all the stuff it does, that's still a really good price. And their R6 they announced at $24.99. I feel like the a7s III is probably more competing with the Canon R6 than it is with the Canon R5, just because it's just concerned with 4K video. It's not trying to do any kind of party tricks or anything like that. And that was another thing with the 12 megapixels. We know that this camera, that the Sony a7s III is not going to be 6K resolution super sampled down to 4K. We know it's not going to be 8K super sampled down to 6K or anything. It's got that 12 megapixel sensor. The best it can do is 4K, but it's going to do a really good 4K, so we can depend on that. Okay, so let's get back to pricing. So I feel like if we use the new Canon cameras as kind of a price anchor, the Canon R5 launched at $38.99, the Canon R6 launched at $24.99. I feel like the a7s III is more competing with the Canon R6 as far as video is concerned, and I feel like it's going to have better specs all around. It's going to be more video centric, and it's going to have newer technology in it that's really going to put it as far as competing quality wise. I feel like it's going to beat the R6 pretty easily. And so to compete with that, it still has to have a competitive price, right? It can't be twice as much as that, or they're going to lose market share. But if we take into account that back in 2015 the a7s II launched at $3,000, a couple years ago the a7 III, which had a lot of great video features in it, launched at $2,000, so that was really competitive. Before that, the Canon R3 launched at $3,200, and then the Canon R4 just last fall launched at $3,500. And so if we're using, for context, Canon's pricing and then what Sony has done in the past, I feel like we could expect a pricing for the a7s III anywhere between $3,000 and $3,500. I would be really surprised if they went outside of that range. They may do like a $28.99 or something. I kind of hope they don't, because price that low, I feel like they won't do what I want them to do in the camera. And so I feel like I'm willing to pay a little bit more to get things done internally and to make the camera great. You know, pay a little extra for a great LCD screen, all of those things. I feel like if they price it any more than $3,500, they're really going to be alienating themselves from the people who want to buy this, and from the people who are going to be looking at that Canon R6 and saying, hey, this has a lot of great video features on it. This may be time to make a transition. If they price it above $3,500, I really feel like that's going to push them too far out to compete effectively with that camera. If I had to make a guess right now, I feel like they're going to launch this at around like $3,200, maybe $3,299. If we get all the things that we want in it, and there's internal recording, and the LCD screen is awesome, and we get everything that we want, raw, you know, if it launches with raw video and it's not an update they have to do later, then I could see going to $3,499. But if they go much past that $3,500, I feel like they would be quick to offer rebates or discounts on that come the holiday season, maybe this fall. And so that's my take on it. I feel really good about this camera now. I'm just glad that it's finally here, that it's finally coming here in the next few weeks. We're in for a ride. Canon has definitely put a good foot forward with their Canon R5 and R6. I feel like we have a lot to look forward to from Sony, but at the same time, let's say worst case scenario, that they botch this up, that they completely just do not meet expectations. Not only do they not exceed expectations, but they don't meet basic expectations at all, and they disappoint us. Let's say they price it way too high, that it's not you know, it's not realistic for people to put that much money into a camera right now, then I feel like the worst case scenario, hey, we got the Canon R6 to go and to heal our wounds, to lick our wounds, and to give us that shot in the arm that we're needing as videographers to really start to increase our quality and increase our creativity, just have a better tool for a modern era. So hey, these have been my thoughts. I've been Luke from Wedding Film Coach. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel. Here's what I want you to do. I would love for you to subscribe to my channel, because I'm going to be doing more videos about all of these releases and about more news that we find out. And as soon as I get these cameras in, I'm going to be doing some extensive testing on them, everywhere from autofocus to overheating to best settings for video use, especially during weddings. So you definitely want to stay tuned to the channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and shoot me a comment. Let me know what you think about these videos. How can I make them better for you? And yeah, I want everybody to learn here. So thanks again for your time. Have a great day. I'll see you later.